take, if you were to continually tap it, wouldn't the computer switch over between that sound?
I don't know. I don't know. I had a lot of trouble last time.
Is that
I
right?
didn't realize that people couldn't hear me until I watched the video. And I hope people are watching the video. I posted it on YouTube. I saw there were 20 some views, but thank you, Micah. I don't know.
Okay.
I'll try them all. So when Char is jumping up and down going, you know why, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Anyways, have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Derek.
Thank you, Char. All right. So welcome everyone to, this is our second event here on the Electric Mermaid. Wonderful to have everybody joining us again tonight from wherever you are. We're right across the country for sure, all the way from Cape Breton, well, just off the coast of Cape Breton Island to Vancouver Island. So we're spanning the whole country tonight. It's amazing. Wonderful. And I want to say right off the bat that we're coming to you from the unceded territory of the Hupetcheseth and the Sishat First Nation. And we're zooming to you via Char's Landing in beautiful downtown Port Alberni, the literary navel of Vancouver Island, I like to call it. And we're really looking forward to hearing everybody read tonight, and thanks to the people who have joined just to listen. We always appreciate having extra ears as well. And so hopefully we'll inspire you to, if you haven't done some of your own writing already, to try some maybe, and even to take that big step and sign up as an open mic reader next time. And you have a 5-minute slot if you'd like it to share with us whatever you have. So we're a pretty non-critical, non-judgmental, diverse group here. So we welcome people to read from whatever genre and on whatever topic they like, providing, of course, that it stays tasteful and is not hateful or diminutive to any particular part of society or culture or race or individuals, I guess, okay within fiction, but not the place to come on and slag people. But history has shown we have a pretty respectful crowd here, and it's appreciated. So everyone that's on as a open mic reader will get their 5 minutes tonight, and then of course the featured readers will have a little longer than that. And just for those of you who might not be familiar with Zoom, I'm just going to talk about a couple of quick things that you can do. Up in your top right-hand corner is the view button that Char mentioned. So you can go between speaker view or gallery view. Gallery view, you see everybody. Speaker view, you just see those who are talking in full form in your screen. And it's a little bit more intimate that way if you have the speaker view on for when people are reading, because you get a little bit more of a closer connection with the reader. So I like to do that. Down below on the bottom bar, there's a chat button. If you hit that, the chat will pop up on the side, and you can post chats to everyone in there, just with the drop-down menu beside the two. And you can send, kudos privately there if you prefer to particular readers that you've enjoyed or that you want to connect with. There's anything there that you want to share with the whole group, like maybe the title of your book or ways to get a hold of you or whatever, or upcoming events, that would be awesome place to throw it in there. Then you don't have to eat up your reading time talking about it, which is good as well. Also want to mention that the Alberni Valley Anthology that we're working on has extended its deadline for submissions. So if you missed that first cutoff, not to worry, you have until January the 15th. And this is going to be a fundraiser for the local charity of the Writer's Choices. We're going to just vote on what local charity to give the money to. RCN Media has generously offered to publish it and submit the profits to the charity. And Jackie and I are going to be going through the submissions after January the 15th, I guess, and weeding things down and letting everybody know when it's going to be coming out. And hopefully that'll happen, I don't know, late February, maybe March, April at the very latest for sure. And we'll do a little launch for that here as well, probably on the Electric Mermaid. So those, the submissions for that Poetry, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. If it's poetry, maximum 50 lines, submit up to 3 poems for consideration. Short stories or nonfiction pieces up to 2,500 words. Again, you can submit a couple of pieces and for consideration. The only caveat is that the writing has some link to the Alberni Valley, because this is going to be kind of a local fundraiser in a lot of ways, and we want to have that, as long as it's somehow linked, whether that's even a single mention of a reference in there that's local, whatever, but somehow connected to the Alberni Valley. And of course, it's open to writers from wherever. So Marjorie, you're welcome even to write from the East Coast. We'd be happy to have you. All right, Jackie, anything I've missed there that I need to cover? All good? Okay, all right. So let's get started here with our open micers. And I see we've got a pretty healthy slate tonight, so everybody's going to try and stick to the 5-minute limit. And hopefully I won't have to come on screen with you and kick you off. Gently, of course. So let's hear Phoenix.
He's not on right now, so we'll go to number 2.
Oh, number 2. Okay, so Kathleen Vance, Kathleen Vance.
Okay.
We'll turn the screen over to you if you want to unmute yourself. There you are, Kathleen.
Okay. Anne would never have moved into the isolated farmhouse if she'd known it was haunted. It wasn't until after she and her husband and another couple had rented the house on Rapids Road that Anne had learned from a neighbor that the former tenant had been decapitated in a motorcycle accident when he failed to round the steep curve just before the house. I see the lights at night as he approaches that curve, still trying to get home, the neighbor had said. Anne should have known when she first tried to drive to the house on her own. That's when she discovered that all the roads in the area were called Rapids Road, so that whenever you came to an intersection, all the signs read the same. Apparently, every time a new road had been built, they had just used the same name, Rapids Road. Finding home was like learning an intricate dance routine where you had to remember not only the steps coming up, but the ones you had already taken. That late fall evening, her husband and the other couple were out visiting friends, and Anne was in the living room of the 2-story farmhouse, vacuuming up dead fruit flies, when she sensed something in the room and looked to her right. She saw a hand, a disembodied hand, no arm, just a hand, and it was reaching for her. Anne found herself at the top of the stairs with no memory of having climbed them. She grabbed the hall wall phone, called her husband to come home because something was in the house, and barricaded herself in the upstairs bedroom. Suddenly she heard a bang on the door. What was that? More banging, louder and louder, so loud it had to be real. Anne moved the dresser from the door, opened it, and slowly inched her way down the stairs. When across the living room, she saw the front door knob turning. "What's the matter with you? Why didn't you answer the door?" he shouted. Anne recognized the burly older man with the gruff voice, the landlord. "You got the rent check for the month?" "No, I'm here alone." "Oh, should I have said that?" No. "The others must have it." "I know we paid our share anyway." "Well, see that I get it. I'll be back." And he stepped out into the darkness. Anne didn't want to go back upstairs because of what might be up there now that she had been distracted at the door. So she turned on every light downstairs and settled into the large living room chair facing the door. More knocking, but this time voices too. "Open up, it's Karl and Joan, you know, from school. Open the door." Anne opened the door and all but burst into Joan's arms. She knew her. She was a nursing student. Karl was her friend. "Please come in and wait with me. Something really weird has happened." And Anne told them all about it. I think it was him, the headless motorcycle rider, reaching out for me, trying to get home. "How do you know we're not ghosts?" Karl asked. "Maybe you're just imagining us so you'll feel safer," Joan added. "Yeah, Joan knows all about that. She studied it in her psych nursing classes." No, please don't do this," Anne pleaded. But they kept on and on about how could she be sure they were really there. Anne couldn't make them shut up. So she started doing math problems in her head. First arithmetic, then multiplication and long division. And then when Karl said, maybe none of this is real and all of this is in your head, maybe you're dead or just crazy. Anne turned to algebra. Quickly think, insane people can't do algebra. 2x plus 4y equal 20, x plus y equals 6, solve for x and y. Concentrate on, don't listen to them. X equals 6 minus y, so 2 times 6 minus y plus 4y equals 12, minus 2y equals 20. No, that's wrong. 12 minus 2y plus 4y is 12, plus 2y is 20. Take 12 from 20, that leaves 2y's equal 8. So y equals 4, so x is 2. I got the answer. I am not crazy. Oops, I said that last bit out loud. How do you know that? What are you thinking about? Karl kept on with his endless questions. I'm doing math problems. That proves I'm not crazy. What makes you think crazy people can't do math? Maybe they're very good at it. Karl just wouldn't stop, but then Anne's husband arrived. Come upstairs with me while I pack. With you or alone, I'm leaving this house, Anne told him. They packed, got into the car, and set out on Rapids Road for the last time. Melanie never would have agreed to rent the isolated farmhouse if she had known it was haunted. It was a neighbor who had told her about the former tenants and the car crash and about how you could see the lights at night on Rapids Road as the couple kept trying to find their way back to the city. The end.
Thank you, Kathy. That was hilarious. Hilarious horror. My favorite kind. Absolutely. I can't handle a real horror, but that kind is perfect. All right. I guess you're going to hand the screen over to David Kipling now, who's standing there beside you. And I don't know, maybe a little closer to the mic. For me, that was a little hard to hear, Kathy. I mean, I could, but I had to get close in there. I don't know if anybody else had that experience, but anyway, just make sure you keep your volume up there.
Oh my gosh, because I was...
Yes, you were. Okay. Oh, what do I do? Am I...
Nothing. You're unmuted.
Okay, I can speak?
Yeah.
Yeah, go right ahead. You're on.
Okay. In the dusty yellow light of the night shift, the unending stream of hot bricks from the kiln poured down the chute towards Yasmir's workstation, where she scrabbled to pull the bad from the good bricks moving to storage. Simple enough, even a monkey could do this, the supervisor Alexis had grunted when Yasmir started 3 weeks ago. Even a Turkish monkey can do this. Tonight, the din of the brick factory had pummeled Yasmir for 5 hours, and there were still 3 to go before she could run to get Bazan from the upstairs neighbor, dress him and feed him breakfast, run into the kindergarten, then to the shops and back to their basement to sleep a few hours. Her head ached. Night shifts were the worst, and Alexis gave them to Turks because he could, and because he was a Latvian, and the Vorarbeiter Schneider called Alexis a Baltic peasant and made him run the night shift. From behind her scarred metal table, Yasmir continually reached over to grab the next wooden tray and stacked the incoming good bricks on it, 4 on top of 4. She then hoisted the heavy tray onto the fast-moving conveyor belt, which would carry it to the warehouse. Yasmir chanted and nodded as she watched the bricks come under her hands and knocked the defective ones off the belt onto a growing heap on the floor beside her. Gut, 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 schlecht, gut, 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 schlecht. Her mind wandered and dwelled on her 5-year-old Bazan, who was sleeping with a neighbor. And too late, she saw that she loaded a tray with 2 defective bricks onto the belt. She leaned far over to retrieve them. Her coat snagged on a pulley and ripped as the bricks moved past out of reach. Perhaps no one would notice. Gut, 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 schlecht. Her German was improving. Until yesterday, she had been saying Scheiß for every defective brick, copying the word that peppered any reprimands from Alexis. Yesterday, when she dropped Bazan at the kindergarten, she told her little boy not to be Scheiß, and the staff had looked at each other and the supervisor had taken her discreetly aside. The pile of discards now reached her knees, but the roving clean-up man with his wheelbarrow was not appeared in the last hour. Mehmet was away for 2 weeks on a training course in Dortmund, after finally passing the language test. Yazmir hated being without Mehmet. Alexis would sidle up at random moments and ask if they rode camels where she came from, if they had flying carpets, if all the women were belly dancers, which he mimicked, facing her. The bricks poured on towards her in an unstoppable flood. Her gloved hands flew, sweeping broken bricks off, stacking 4 on 4 on the next tray and heaving it onto the fast-moving belt. Dust caked her neck under her hijab, and the gloves they'd given her were too big. They made her fingers clumsy. Her shoulders ached. Mehmet had said that if he got the government plumbing job, she would be able to quit the factory and work part-time days in a cafe, or maybe even not work at all. Without warning, Alexis suddenly brushed against her back and adjusted some part of the mechanism, and Yazmir jumped, dislodging a brick she'd just squared on the next tray, and couldn't replace it before the conveyor had taken them away. A minute later, she saw the foreman appear at the warehouse door, raising a hand, holding a broken brick and tapping his forehead. Dumb, foul. Alexis opened an iron inspection hatch in the side of the furnace, and the flash of heat made her wince and turn her head, and thus see, oh, Hayir, one of the men was pissing off the loading dock instead of going across to the toilet. She turned back. Her baggy coat. What?
Oh, I don't know. I think it means that they're almost at 5 minutes. Is it just about finished?
Oh, about 6 lines. Okay. And staying by the grease, Alexis had slopped onto the rollers. I timed it. And the coat cuffs scratched her wrists, and her stomach was rebelling against the lamb sausage she had eaten at the Schnell Imbiss before the shift started. And now she had cramps. And now Alexis was yelling something across the racks, but his accent was indescribable. The cracked brick started to avalanche onto her feet, and the light turned a sour color, and she grabbed a perfect brick, a sehr gut brick, very hard in her strong hand, and swung it with all her strength and threw it across the aisle to explode against the wall beside Alexis. And she tossed her gloves high into the spinning machinery and walked away from the noise and across the loading dock and into the street and over to the all-night food van on the Eichenplatz, where she couldn't decide between a chocolade or a saffron bun, and so bought both, while behind her towering columns of smoke and dust and steam wavered like ghosts in the floodlit sky.
The end.
The end. I timed it at less than 5.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. That was awesome. Amazing power of imagination to be able to write that. That's beautiful and heart-rending at the same time. So we're gonna dive into our featured readers here now, and starting off with Craig Copland, who is coming to us from the Okanagan Valley, as far as I know, but has lived all over the place from let's see, Buenos Aires, New York City, Tokyo, Bahrain, Toronto, and he is a prodigious author of 43 books along the new Sherlock Holmes mystery series. After winning a contest for writing Sherlock Holmes stories, he just dove in with both feet and never looked back. 43 books, I can't imagine. My goodness. And on top of that, you've published lots of other stories and books as well. So kudos to you, man. You've got staying power. That's amazing. So Craig, we're really looking forward to your reading tonight. Take it away.
Okay, can you all hear me loud and clear? Hearing nobody objecting, I assume you can, so I'll start. My journey to doing what I'm now doing began about 50 years ago when I decided to be an English major at the University of Toronto. And not to bore you with what happened over the last half decade, but about 7 or 8 years ago, I thought I could take on my retirement career as a writer of historical fiction. And I did a bit of homework and found out that your chances of getting a publishing gig with a major publisher were not merely 1 in 100, they're about 1 in 1,000. And in order to do that, you either had to be exceptionally talented as a writer, which I'm not. You had to have expertise in some very hot area, which I don't. You had to be a celebrity, which I'm not, or you had to be willing to work 4 or 5 years on one book until you polished it and made it perfect, and I'm far too impatient for that. And you would probably get rejected several hundred times, even if you ever got a publishing deal, and my ego was far too fragile to handle that amount of rejection, so I chose to self-publish. And I chose historical fiction, and specifically Sherlock Holmes, and I assure you, I am not one of the Sherlock Holmes nutters that thinks that Sherlock Holmes is actually all that important. But I realized if I had chosen to write a set of mystery stories about a retired school teacher living in Vernon, BC, it would be probably forever to build a following. But if you put the word Sherlock Holmes out there, somebody somewhere in the world is going to read it. And so that's what I did. And it's also a very fun area to research. The years of Victorian England between 1880 and 1915 are just a fascinating period of history. And it was a lot of fun to learn and research that period. And also Sherlock Holmes stories and Sherlock Holmes fan fiction really are closely, they're pretty closely allied with cozy fiction. There's no blatant violence, there's no explicit sex, there's no raunchy, vulgar language. I was comfortable with that, so I started writing, and I wrote one and put it up, and somebody bought it. And a few months later, I got a check from Amazon for $100 because people had actually bought my first book. So that got me hooked, and I took off. I've been self-employed for years and years, so getting up in the morning and sitting down and going to work was nothing new. That's what you do. And I started churning out the stories, and I'm going to flip my camera around with the hope that you can see my website, and that's me. And then those are the books that I've been cranking out over the last 7 years, and it's been very gratifying. All right, so probably the most gratifying thing is realizing that people actually buy them and enjoy them, and even getting one little email from a fan once a month kind of makes it all worthwhile. So that's my story. If any of you want help in self-publishing on Amazon, I'm delighted to help. I've done that for a number of people. I've run seminars on it. I certainly don't charge for it. It's not difficult. Amazon is a monster, but it's a friendly monster. And it's simply not difficult, not all that hard to get your book in a presentable form and up for sale on Amazon. Getting it to be read and getting it marketed, that's another whole seminar. So my major challenge, and I'm going to move on to this now, in writing historical fiction, historical mysteries, is you've got to hook people with the opening sentence, the opening paragraph, the opening chapter. It's the same as any crime story. The canonical 60 stories of Sherlock Holmes have a very leisurely opening. Holmes and Watson sit around and chatter back and forth and exchange some things, and Holmes makes some brilliant deduction. But you're 2 or 3 pages before the crime is introduced. That worked for Conan Doyle. It really doesn't work today. You need to pull people into a crime mystery, regardless of whether it's set in 2000 BC or 2021 or whenever. So the very first story I wrote, the first story in the canon of Sherlock Holmes is A Study in Scarlet. And I wanted to write a tribute story, and the only Scarlet, or the one that first came to mind, of course, was Scarlett O'Hara. So I created a story where Scarlett O'Hara, who is still searching for Rhett Butler, came to England and asked Sherlock Holmes to please help find her husband. That was my first story. And I'm just going to read the first paragraph or two because I started off in this very leisurely. And at this point, I look back on it and think it's kind of boring, but this is where I started. Our beloved Queen Victoria passed away a year ago. All of England, indeed the entire empire, was saddened. But there was a universal feeling that the old girl had done it well. Throughout the empire, a pall, a lethargy had descended. The old order had changed, but the new one, to which it would yield its place, had not yet begun. From the poor level of our Baker Street irregulars all the way to the earls and lords of the land, we simply waited, wondering what the new era would be like. The Prince of Wales, the heir apparent, was no longer a dashing bon vivant prince. He became a portly, bearded 60-year-old grandfather, and all of his subjects agreed that he was finally grown up and ready to take his rightful role as the head of the greatest empire the world had ever known. In June of 1902, the crowned heads of the world gathered in London for the coronation. 500,000 citizens were given free dinners and tins of chocolate as part of the celebration, only to have the event postponed because Albert Edward was ill with a severe pain in his gut. Now, in early August, he was feeling better, and on Saturday would be crowned the king at Westminster Abbey. I'll stop on that introduction. It goes on to the fact that Sherlock Holmes has to make sure that the king does not end up being assassinated. But that was my first effort. It was kind of slow and leisurely, and I kicked it up a notch. This is from a shorter story, which I submitted to a published anthology. And this is now set in London, and this is how it opens. He was not much more than a child. I estimated his age at 14. He was a handsome boy with the raven black hair and deeply tanned skin that marks a person who comes from the lands that are under the Raj. His young body was beginning to show the signs of an emerging, well-made sportsman. From his place, lying on his back on the pavement, his dark eyes stared up at the morning sky, lifeless. Behind his head was a pool of blood, now darkened and congealed. "Was he one of yours, Holmes?" demanded Inspector Lestrade. "One of your, whatever you call them, irresponsibles?" "Yes, Inspector," said Holmes. "He was one of my irregulars." "What was his name?" "The other lads called him Sahib. He had no other name." "Well, what in heaven's name did you have him doing that ended up with his getting shot in the head?" "It was engaged in surveillance," said Holmes. All right, so I altered the way we open and tried to make it as intense as we could. And I'll just try a different one. This is one, it was a tribute to the Sherlock Holmes story, Silver Blaze. And I started then this one with dialogue. "I am afraid, Watson, that I shall have to go," said Holmes as we sat down together to our breakfast one morning. "Go? Where to?" "Not far, just over to Surrey, Epsom to be precise." "Ah, I am not surprised." This is Watson speaking. "You have been called regarding the death of that poor jockey, have you? Or some other crime being committed already, even before the century race has begun? 3 days ago, the press had reported on the tragic death of one of England's greatest jockeys, Nestor Leggett. He'd been on an early morning ride on the top of Lord Commodore, one of the favorites to win the century race. Well, at full gallop, the horse had suddenly alert, sending the jockey crashing into the furlong pole. He was dead by the time the other trainers and the jockeys got to him. The horse's owner, Lord Biggleworth's older son, Baron Julian, had immediately called for an inquiry and set up a fund to help for the chap's family. He was duly admired for his prompt and compassionate action. "No, on both counts, my good doctor," replied Holmes. "The death of Nestor Leggett is still ruled accidental, although Lestrade is quite likely somewhat suspicious." Okay, I'll stop there. So that was an attempt to open historical mystery with dialogue. And then the other one is opening with the record of an event. And this is called the, what did I call this one? The Adventure of the Morning Glory Hotel. And it is a tribute also to one of the original Holmes stories. "Fortunately, it is exceedingly rare that a family from Buenos Aires moves to London, opens bank accounts, buys property, invests heavily, joins the local Catholic parish, enrolls its children in good schools, hires household staff, and then disappears without a trace. Yet that is what happened in March of 1899, and it resulted in a case for Sherlock Holmes, which, although he ultimately solved it, was not without its tragic consequences. According to the press, and all of London newspapers competed with each other in printing speculation and rumor as to what might have happened. Colonel Conrado Villegas, his attractive English wife Valentina, his 10-year-old son Ricardo, and 14-year-old daughter Wendy were last seen by the hotel caretaker in their living quarters at the Morning Glory Hotel in Twickenham on the evening of 18 March, Saturday, the hotel in question being the property that had been purchased by the Colonel during October of the previous year. All right, those are just a few of the openings I've worked on, and I'll just stop there. And if you have any comments or questions, please go ahead. Or I may be out of time already for all I know.
No, if you want, we have always time for questions and answers.
Anybody have a question they'd like to pose, Craig?
Come on. Oh, am I supposed to put it on the chat or can I just speak?
Just speak. Yeah, go ahead. Unmute and speak. You're unmuted. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm just fascinated that you have 40 titles. And how does it work when you have you know, a previous author who has, you know, the original Sherlock Holmes? How does it work that you say, well, that you're going to add to I don't understand. Explain everything.
Okay.
How does it work?
Well, what I'm writing really is fan fiction. And almost all of the original 60 stories of Sherlock Holmes, all but 8 of them, are now in the public domain. So Sherlock Holmes belongs to the public, and as a result, you've got Benedict Cumberbatch and Robert Downey Jr. and Johnny Mercer and all these people playing Sherlock Holmes. He can be whoever you want him to be. Some people, you know, put him in the future. Some people transport him to San Francisco. But there's a group of us who write what we call canonical stories. And that means Sherlock and Watson live in London between 1880 and 1915. And the stories at least sound as if they might have been written by Arthur Conan Doyle, but they weren't.
Okay, so obviously you are a huge fan of Arthur Conan Doyle, and you were talking. You mentioned something about tribute to certain titles. So you would take a story of his, which you had very much enjoyed, and change it up, elaborate, do what you wanted with it, but in a strange kind of way. It's an homage to him, that particular story. Have I got this right?
Exactly. He wrote 60 stories. I'm writing one story that is a tribute to each of the original 60, and I'm working through in chronological order by the dates when they were originally published. So I started with A Study in Scarlet. The last one he wrote in 1928, and that was the Shoscombe Old Place, and I'm slowly working my way through.
Okay, so he did 60 titles. You're at 40. So I presume you're going to just keep on going to 60 and beyond?
I've written a lot of short stories as well, about a dozen of those for Sherlock Holmes anthologies. And these are shorter ones. They're about 10,000 words. The novellas that I write are short novels. They've ranged from about 30,000 to 50,000 normally. One went to 80,000. It was a full novel. But yes, I'm just going to keep plugging away until I finish the course, and then I don't know what I'll do. I'll be unemployed.
Wow. Well, I will stop asking questions. I'm sorry, it's a journalist in me. I get all excited. But, I just find this absolutely fascinating. I would love to take a you know, whatever online course with you about selling your work on Amazon. It's a complete mystery land to me. But I have a friend in Vancouver who does very well in that regard too. So I find that fascinating. So I do hope we all keep in touch this evening, because you know, these are good contacts and great folks we're meeting. So thank you very much for your reading.
Okay, I don't actually run full courses. I've run evening seminars for friends and other writing groups just for the fun of it. And I've spent time on the phone with other people individually, just walking them through, and more than happy to do it. I enjoy doing that.
Craig, would you consider doing a workshop for Electric Mermaid?
I'd be very happy to. It probably takes, when I've done it before, it takes about 2 hours to walk people right through the whole process of getting up on Amazon.
All right.
And then probably another hour and a half to do basics on how in the world you get people to find your books, buy your books, market your books, all that stuff.
Okay, we can talk via email, but it sounds like 2 workshops, a set of 2 workshops, okay? So we'll set that up, okay? Electric Mermaid is on it.
I love it.
Right.
Craig, I wanted to ask, what's the craziest situation you put Sherlock and Watson in?
Question.
Oh no, that is tricky. I did send them to Japan because I had lived in Tokyo, And about 5 or 6 years ago, I climbed Mount Fuji, and it just about killed me. And so I sent Sherlock and Watson up and made them go through the same thing.
Perfect.
Can I ask about Moriarty? Is he part of any of it?
Oh, yes. Now, Moriarty himself only appears in a couple of the original stories, so you can't put him in everything, but he's appeared 3 or 4 times already in the books, and he is the evil nemesis. But keep in mind that halfway through the chronology, Holmes killed him when he threw him into the gorge.
For sure. Yeah, no, for sure.
So, but yes, Moriarty is fun to put in, or Moriarty's minions and Scions are part of the stories.
The son of Moriarty. Perfect. All right. I think we'll have to hold on the questions there, but thank you very much, Craig. Enjoyed that. That was very, very instructive and entertaining and engaging. And hopefully we can look forward to doing a workshop with you in the future here. That's awesome.
Delighted to, whatever works.
Beautiful. Okay, before we get on to Marjorie here, I just wanted to remind folks that if anybody's feeling in the Christmas spirit and generous and all that, and would like to donate something towards Char's Landing to keep this venue going, to keep her beautiful social network going, and that gorgeous building that she's got down there in Argyle Street, they can e-transfer to etransfer@charslanding.com. And she'd be more than grateful to receive the financial assistance in this time when she's not able to bring people in and do her normal gigs to keep herself going. Hostel's still alive. People can stay there for a reasonable rate and everything else, but none of the social gatherings. So it's been a really hard time for her. So that was etransfer@charslanding.com. All right. Let's move on then to our next featured reader, Marjorie Simmins, coming to us all the way from the East Coast of Canada, a small island whose name I've forgotten, but she'll remind us, off the coast of Cape Breton Island. And we're really, really happy to have you here tonight, Marjorie. Marjorie is also an award-winning and widely published journalist who's taught personal narrative writing in seminars all across the country and taught it for over 25 years now. So obviously an old pro, and we're all looking forward to hearing what you're going to read tonight and learning from it. I believe that you're going to read from your latest book, but I'll let you say yes or no, but I do want to mention that book. It's called Memoir, Conversations in Craft, and it includes interviews with such notable personal narrative writers and writers in general: Lawrence Hill, Lyndon McIntyre, one of my favorites, Diane Chamberlain. And so I'll turn it over to Marjorie. Welcome. You're unmuted. Go ahead. Oh, no, you're not unmuted.
I'm unmuted. There we are.
Okay.
The first thing I want to say is a huge thanks to Jackie Carmichael for asking me to come aboard here. I'm delighted to it feels kind of peculiar to me on Ile Madame in Cape Breton, in my little village called Discus, which is about 250 people, and talking to the West Coast. It's a strange and lovely thing. So good evening and hello to everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Again, I am a journalist. I teach memoir writing and creative nonfiction, and have done that all across the country at really fun places, at National Historic Sites and so on, and the UBC Alumni Center a year or so ago. And I love teaching. I love teaching every age. Even junior high, I have been known to teach. They're a little scary, as I was in junior high as well. But at any rate, so this is my latest book. It's my third book. And of course, that's reversed, isn't it? Memoir, Conversations in Craft. And I will just mention all the people who are in here, all 7. Don't worry, it's not too long a list. And it is Lawrence Hill, Plum Johnson, Lyndon McIntyre, Edwin Matachawaban, Donna Morrissey, Claire Mowat, and Diane Chamberlain. And basically what I did is I interviewed them about their books. I looked in my own memoir library and I it was like my dream team. I thought, who could I put in a book that would, would just be a joy to interview, who I really feel would give people a lot to think about when it comes to writing memoir. So I literally picked out 7 books, and I thought, well, I'll try for these ones. Maybe I'll get 1 or 2. We'll see what happens. Everybody said yes. So it was just my totally lucky year. Bless them all. Had a wonderful time talking with them, and left it pretty open-ended. Basically said, let's talk about memoir, and I'd have a few questions and I'd guide them one way or another, but wanted to know their own thoughts on it. So again, wasn't too directive. Was glad I did that because people were hysterically funny, I thought. One person would say, well, if I hadn't done memoir, I couldn't have done fiction. The very next person would say, well, if I hadn't done fiction, I couldn't do memoir. And I'd go, yes. And I would just nod and look wise because they would totally be contradicting one another. But that's what the writing process is all about. What works for me might not necessarily work for you, and so on. And I found that just fascinating. So it's not just memoirs, not just interviews in the book. It's my own thoughts on how you can get that memoir down on paper, and whether or not you want to traditionally publish it or write it for your grandkids or whatever it might be. I'm not a memoir snob. I love literary fiction and nonfiction as much as anyone, but I think anyone has the right to write and perhaps the need to write. I honor that, and so what people tell me what they want, and I help to take them where they want to go. So what I'm going to read tonight, if I ever want to get sort of a lively thing going in a memoir workshop, I say, let's talk about the truth. And people actually think they know what the truth is. And I'm here to tell you, nobody knows what the truth is. It's ever changing. It's a chameleon. And of course, it's incredibly individual. So this is just a short interchapter on the truth, because of course, when we sit down to write memoir, sort of one of the dictates is, well, it has to be a true story. And I say, yes, it does. But that, there's also something called creative fiction, creative nonfiction. And without it, you're lost, because you're not going to remember what happened 40 years ago. You're not going to remember what happened 4 minutes ago in terms of dialogue or whatever else. So let's just, relax when we talk about the truth, or at least think about it in a deeper way. So let me read. The truth. There's a myth in the world known as objective journalism. In fact, there's no such thing. All newspapers lean a bit more left, right, or center, according to the publishers and owners' biases and connections. This is further influenced by corporate connections and financial support. The reporters themselves bring suitcases of personal histories and opinions to each and every story they write, and can readily assemble facts to create the one that interests them the most. Then there are other trite phrases such as, just the facts, ma'am, which is supposed to reassure a reader that a story in the newspaper presents only the facts, no fluff, and no opinion or prejudice either. Newspaper or magazine articles, personal essays or memoirs all contain facts, selectively chosen, and all present a story as carefully chosen. Now you can check on facts, though this has become laborious in an age of real fake news and fake news. Often we can only grasp onto basic facts such as the date, time, and place an event occurred. The writer will choose the story they do according to their own wants, needs, and assorted urgent imperatives. You can't even attempt to check on these. Or if you do, you could find everyone else connected to that story in complete disagreement, or not. A story in its simplest form consists of selected facts presented as a single narrative. In every case, someone, a unique individual, made the selection. Someone else would have selected differently. And that's the deeply subjective process that underlies every story. Being subjective does not mean being untruthful or unfair. It simply means acknowledging that you are the person who created the story and doing your best to compensate for your own shortcomings and ignorance. Adding to the oddity of it, everyone is right. Your mental and emotional snapshot of an event or experience is as true as anything concrete and provable in this world, including mountains, bridges, and Japanese cherry trees. even if it's completely erroneous. Your story may not even be your own. If you are a younger sibling, for example, you may have heard a certain story from an older sibling many times over and have incorporated their memory into your own set. I've even had the experience of asking an older sibling about a memory she'd told me about years before, only to have her say, "No, I don't remember that." A secondhand memory that was seared into my brain was apparently not even in my sister's recollection anymore. This same sister said our mother had talked about having relatives from Britain who were among the first school teachers in Nova Scotia. But when she asked about this again, some years later, our mother denied it. And before you suggest otherwise, I know this sister to have a sharp and accurate memory. Of course she does. Her memories often align with mine. I once asked my father if he'd really said to my mother, "Your best is not good enough." I'd been angry about that for decades. My mother worked like a draft horse to look after her 4 kids when she and Dad were married, and like a team of draft horses after Dad left the family. "No," said my startled father, I never said that. But your mother said that to me." Oh. And even as I tell this story, I'm worried that it was indeed the other way around. Have I misremembered again? It's been 20 years since I lost my parents. I can't ask them about these things anymore. Perhaps the only truth is that I don't like thinking that either parent was capable of saying that to the other. That feels real. In my family, I am known as having an acute memory. I have often teased my older brother about the apparent gaps in his memory related to childhood or teenage years. I don't do this as much anymore, as I've finally figured out there's a large pain link there, which causes us to forget certain times in our lives. So I only tease about gentle lapses in memory. Memory, after all, has a way of revising reality, so we really believe things that are not true. Memory even likes to protect us at times. I protected myself, for example, about memories related to my maternal grandmother's funeral. "Why didn't we go to her funeral?" I asked my brother, feeling confused about that lapse in memory, but certain that he and I had not attended the funeral. "You didn't," he said promptly, "but I did." I didn't believe him. "Why would you go and I wouldn't?" I asked him. "Because Mom asked us if we wanted to go. She gave us the option. You said no. I said yes." I still didn't know how to believe him. I asked him a bunch of questions, to which I knew the answers from around that exact time, and he answered every one correctly. So he had gone to the funeral at the Presbyterian Church in Kerrisdale, Vancouver, in 1974. He really had gone. "But why?" I wailed. "Would I not go to the funeral?" To myself, I thought, how could I be so heartless not to support my mother and show respect for my grandmother? At 15 years old, I was more than old enough to manage a funeral. "I don't know," my brother shrugged. "You just didn't." Not only had I forgotten that I didn't attend the funeral, I'd also forgotten that my brother had gone to it. Do not ask me if my older sister attended. I have no idea. In this book, I have suggested to you that you should be both honest and truthful in your memoir. It is a suggestion seemingly as straightforward as "turn right at the next corner," said to the driver of a car by his navigator. And of course, it is not. Whenever possible, support your story by checking family documents such as letters, journals, personal papers, and so on. You can also check newspapers of the times. After that, and only if you wish to, because it would completely rock your memory, check with older siblings and older family members about the comings and goings of others in the family. Mostly focus on your own understanding of an event or transition as it affected you. Had I written about the funeral of my grandmother, I would have skipped the actual funeral, thinking that for some reason I just didn't remember it very well. Most likely I would have written about how the death of my grandmother affected my mother, who was heartbroken, and her apparently less emotional granddaughter. That would be me. So I apologize, Grandma Josie, and I do have nice memories about you, especially the stories you told about the St. Bernard dogs you had growing up. Now that I think of it, didn't your mother, the fine watercolor painter, Josephine Joe Dixon, have a whole kennel of those dogs? There, see? My memory's not so bad. I might also have written about my lack of deep connection with my grandmother, but also about my deep respect for her as a veteran of World War I and a frontline nurse in France, seeing some of the worst injuries and deaths imaginable of men and animals and women. I knew this because Mum had told us about her nursing career so often and speculated that that's why her hands shook so much. There are times when a writer can speak with great authority. How did the loss of your firstborn child change your world? You know, as no one else could possibly know. When did you feel that complete loss of innocence that a child should have had for so much longer than you did? Tell me about that. What changes did you make to your life after your divorce? And why did you move from the city to the country? There shouldn't be too many wobblies in these accounts. And if there are, you will deal with them as an artist is allowed to, with imagination, research, and careful, intuitive thought. Memoir is a blend of truth and art. I cannot remember the dress I was wearing when I went to my first day of school, but I can remember wearing the dresses of the time, and my favorites among these. I can remember wanting patent leather shoes more than the moon and the stars, of being envious to the point of feeling sick that so many of my classmates had them, in black, in white, in pink. But I wore black and white Oxfords because I needed, dear God, arch support for my flat feet. I also remember tearing 2 sets of cotton tights in 1 week and my mum looking stricken. Just where was the money going to come from for more stockings? Trust these memories that speak to you. I believe with all my heart in the memories I just shared with you. I can write whole stories around those memories, not just present the bare bones. I believe in my truths, however abbreviated or incomplete they may be. I also believe that I want to share those truths as I have lived them and now safeguard in memory.
Beautiful, Marjorie. Thank you so much. That was lovely and so instructive. And I know I taught creative nonfiction as well, and that was one thing students always wrestled with, you know, but I'm not sure if that's the way it was. It's okay. You're an artist, write it in.
Stop sweating, it's okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. We're getting a little tight on time here, so I'm going to maybe put your Q&A off, and if we have some time at the end, maybe we can see if anyone has any questions for you.
Yeah, Jacqueline, because we're going to get Herb on right next so he can go, and then we'll get back to the question and answers.
Yep, that sounds good. All right. So,
sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. It's all good. All right. So, Herb, Bryce, I think you're up next then.
I thought I was fourth. Sorry.
It's my fault. I have another meeting which is already starting, and I have promised to be there, and they're expecting me. So your people have been so kind as to squeeze me in, and I apologize to everybody else for sure. Thank you. All right. So this thing is running for 5 minutes. So let's get on. It's called The Past, the Present, and the Future. The Past. The past was a gas, mustard gas, laughing gas, siphoning gas at age 8, having a gas in high school, untamed tigers we were. Life was a drive-in cinema that turned us on. It was war again in the jungle where vines strangled hope, cultivated despair. We watched images, Korea. Young soldiers shooting young students like ducks in a pond. Our spirits drowning in puddles of fear and disgust and loss as the age morphed into rebellious but often ineffectual mobs. often dispersed with tear gas. Yeah, life was a gas in the past, yet we survived. We dreamed on. We dreamed on. Yesterday's ideals left behind, strewn randomly on yesterday's battlefield to wilt and be grown over by nature's own scar tissue as we grieved over past mistakes. But the dream factory never closes. Even as snipers send souls heavenward in spiritual clouds, as elusive as fulfillment of dreams and families' grief. And yet we dreamed on. And yet we dreamed on. The present. Here we are in the present, a neo-modern generation of innocently hopefuls, seeking that new start, that new deal. But like our forefathers and their forefathers before them, having to wheel and deal like crazy people for every right once guaranteed, but so slyly tweaked by the mighty few who hike their own power and strong income at the cost of the poor few dollars. But we dreamers, we dream on. Even the chaos persists, politicians wrangling for favor and dealing with destruction to gain power over others' resources. But the dream factory never shuts its gates. Snipers today shoot from the lip, and injuries are the paycheck, and the reborn politically correct army revives like cockroaches after a raid. In the middle of the muddle in the east and the west, trade rockets and exchange that what passes as rhetoric over ancient histories that should have been put to bed in biblical times. And the Eastern world is rising against the Western world and forming world banks and power bases in that old people game of what you got, I want. And some people bury their dreams in the struggle to exist. But like munitions factories, the dream factory never closes its gates. The future. Here we are in the new neo-future, going forth where no dream has gone before, where clouds are left far behind us, and bluebirds sing their songs anew. We stride with pride in confidence where no fence confines us. We dance to the rhythm of a new world song, and we build upon a new peace where gas is defined as chit-chat. Verbal pats on the back, friends and everybody's your friend. In this next age of man, peace will reign. Boredom will be stricken off the list. And record of man will hold no stain, and daily life will be living bliss. Why do I say so? Because man can do anything, including getting along with fellow man, by which belief I'm concluding. If man can wish, then man can do. Start now to hew your future path. Wish for peace and follow each clue. Beware the answer, not in math. We may not have angels with wings, but we do have angels with will and with love, served up with hot spice. We may hear whispers from ghosts of our vengeful past, but people no longer heed their evil advice. This future life is proving the goodness of good, though still we can dream of more good. Deep in our cores, life on cloud 9 is comfy and very secure, but the dream factory never closes its doors. Truth be told, we have found our heaven on earth. Things that once we had dreamed of are granted for free. Boredom is banished. There is always something to do. We don't need conflict to open our eyes to see. Can humans ever be satisfied to the core? The old dream factory never closes its door.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you, Herb.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Awesome.
Thank you, Herb.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Hope we'll see you next time in the new year, 2021. It's going to be better than 2020, guaranteed.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, everybody.
Take good care. All
Okay.
right.
So I think we're still okay in time, I think. So if anybody has questions for Marjorie, they can ask it. If not, then we can go on.
Okay. Marjorie, unmute yourself.
Marjorie, are you still with us?
Yeah, she's there.
Still here.
There she is.
I don't bite. Just throw out your questions, you know.
Marjorie, I'd love to hear.
I know somebody's working on a memoir.
Marjorie, I'd love to hear a little bit just about your background in journalism.
Oh, sure. I started freelancing back in the 90s with I trotted down to the Vancouver Sun with my newly minted BA in English Lit and said, "Hi, I want to work for you." And they went, "Go to hell." So that didn't work. And that actually could sum up the way I've done things my entire life. I've never gone in a front door. I have never gone in a front door. I've always gone in the side door. So that's okay. You get where you want to go. Yeah, I started freelancing, and that was when Max Wyman was doing his lovely Saturday Review, and all the freelancers in Vancouver fought to get into it. I also decided that I had a background in commercial fishing. And so I was one of the very few women that was covering commercial fishing stories for a number of magazines and newspapers and so on. I loved it. I couldn't believe there weren't more women doing it. I got my freezer full of fantastic fish, and I get to do all these adventures. And I thought, gee, I need more fish. I need more adventures. So I branched out into sport fishing. And that was, the men and women weren't as nice in that sphere as the commercial people. They were all rich and weird, but I still got fish, and I still got the stories, so it was great. Yeah, and then I just realized that, you know, that was my whole idea, is starting with writing a memoir, is I started writing personal essays. So something would happen to me and I'd think, that looks like a story. Let's see if I can make it into one. And so again, that would be to the Sun or to the Toronto Star, or to the Montreal Gazette, or whatever it might be. And just kept on with that. So when I wrote my first memoir, I was so pleased for this. Basically, the first memoir, Coastal Lives, is about how I was transplanted to Cape Breton from Vancouver, screaming all the way, I might add. Not really, but no, it was love. It was love. And, but there was a lot of culture shock for the girl wonder here. I mean, the smallest place I'd ever lived was Vancouver, and I came to a village of 250 people. So yeah, there was.
That's amazing. So I have another question for you then. Your beloved partner passed recently. Very sorry for the loss of a really wonderful writer. But his book was published right after he died. Is that right? The new one. I have that one as well as yours, and have yet to get into them. But it looks really wonderful.
Yeah, my husband is Silver Donald Cameron, and he died in June unexpectedly. He was sick for a month, and we lost him. And his last book came out in August 11th, and the title is Blood in the Water, A True Story of Revenge in the Maritimes. It is a fabulous book. It was on the bestseller list for over 3 months. It's now selected as one of the best 100 by the Globe and Mail for the year. I've had it confirmed now that we will be doing a movie of the book, and the producers and writers of Trailer Park Boys are going to be doing it, which has me so excited. I mean, you need that kind of genius to do a book of this complexity. So it's doing very well, and I have worked very hard to make sure that it's been a bestseller. I mean, Don did all the hard work, but I just I did the interviews for him and so on, which was kind of weird and wonderful.
Thank you so much, and really appreciate you responding to our invitation and coming to chat with us. This is really lovely.
I really appreciate it. It's been fun. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Beautiful. Look forward. I'll have to get a hold of a copy of that as well now. I've got another book on the list, Blood in the Water. Fabulous. All right. Let's shuffle on then, and we'll move backwards in the list now to Bill Engleson. I think you're on Denman Island, if I remember correctly. Yes, we are. There you are, Bill, and thank you for your patience and being shuffled there. Oh,
mute.
Unmute yourself there.
Okay.
There we go.
From my second book, which is a collection of mostly humorous essays, this one isn't, called Benchmarks. It was the last day of winter, a winter at once more gentle than we might have imagined, but also a winter of hearty Olympian endeavors, of indiscriminate political embarrassments, and of arbitrary avalanching deaths. Having intentionally trimmed down my to-do list and, sadly, giving little thought to the fate of podium people or rampaging snowmobilers cavalierly ripping into distant and dangerous mountains, I ventured into our little village to post a parcel and gather up stray gossip. The air was crisp. A streamer of wood stove smoke clung to the sky as I passed underneath. It dreamily drifted into a nearby meadow, thinning into gray strips of smoky thread. Our little postal emporium these days is on the eastern end of a small lane and parking lot, a few meters from the rustic propane repository. The post office has a facade not unlike a passé Route 66 autocourt, notwithstanding that it offers no overnight respite to transient travelers. Two ambitious apple trees, one on either side of the entrance, stand sentinel. One tree is bastioned in a patch of lawn. A rough-hewn bench rests along the grassy square, almost beckoning pooped parcel posters to take a pause before traipsing off into other demands of the day. Opposite, facing the potholed parking lot, the second tree shadows a more delicate driftwood bench, which eyeballs approaching traffic. I post my package. Conversation is abetted by my aside that one of the benches has recently been repositioned. I'm told it was done a while ago. I hadn't noticed. I tend not to notice the world in winter. Spring sparks my powers of observation. I step into the open air. My mind ignites. Benches, benches. The very best benches sit in a simple yet elegant setting. Classic nooks under speckled arbutus or lofty oak. Rocky knolls reaching out into the somnolent sea. Soft paths winding throughout a churchyard. Some of these charming places of rest appear in surprising fashion. Occasionally, for example, as you stroll in some slightly pampered woods, you may encounter one placed by some parks worker, conservancy volunteer, or trickster troll, each having brilliantly determined where you might need to unencumber yourself. In our village, paths wander through the underbrush. Shortcuts abound, trails weave through the bramble, small bridges ford creeks. Except for a time, the ancient Arts Center built bridge washed away perhaps or collapsed from damp rot and since rebuilt. On a sunny Saturday recently, as hundreds of islanders were gathering in the community hall to say farewell to a beloved islander, I found myself, after exiting the hardware store, paying unanticipated attention to our little Anglican church, remembering I had, to that point, avoided roving its perimeter. Seeking something akin to solace, I found the shady grove wedded next to the little church. In the far corner, etched by peaceful paths, a memorial bench waits for the fatigued trekker. I spent a moment, rested. I ventured around the front of the little church. Across the way, I spotted a glorious octagonal table bench, which had recently appeared in the front yard of the old art center. It begged a round table discussion of a riotous game of outdoor gramoli. The thoughts less tangled, I sauntered up to the hall to say goodbye to my friend. The 1941 Raoul Walsh classic High Sierra kickstarts with Bogart's character, Roy Earl, being sprung from the Indiana State Pen after an 8-year stretch. The first thing he does is go to a nearby park to sit on a beautiful bench, resting under a shedding maple tree. He just wants, quote, to make sure that the grass is still green and the trees are still growing, unquote. It is, and they are. Still, the world has changed for his character. Bogart's brief reflection is one of my favorite moments in film. For Roy Earl, for anyone seeking a toddy of tranquility, as they have to do, all they have to do is wander to a bench and plop down for a while. For island dwellers, beach and bench and reach of sea are part of our spirit. And once you start finding benches, for they are in the most unexpected places, sit a while and reaffirm that the grass is still green and the trees are still growing.
Beautiful. Awesome. Gorgeous, gorgeous descriptions there. Thank you, Bill. And glad you got your power back on and hope it stays on. All right, our next reader is Jule Briese. Jule, bring us on.
So, can you tell me, can you see me okay this way? Am I in the screen?
I can, yes, I can see you with your reindeers on.
I wanted to make it a bit festive, but before I start, Marjorie, my heart goes out to you for your loss. And I just wanted to say, I really appreciated what you said about truth. I write memoir, but I use almost a Haiboon format. And I really look forward to getting your book and delving into that a little bit more. So thank you so much for that. Okay. And I've chosen to read a story that I cut back a little bit called Skokie Lodge Remembered. And it's true, it actually took place 36 years ago yesterday. I don't know how many of you know where Skokie Lodge is, nestled back in behind Lake Louise in Alberta. And so begins the story. Plumes of smoke rising from Skokie Lodge assured us that Paul Pato, supply outfitter for Ski Louise, had a fire blazing. It was already dusking down as Wayne and I arrived at the lodge, following an 8-mile ski from Temple Lodge to Lake Louise ski hill. As luck would have it, the frigid, windless, sunny stretch of weather had created the perfect ski conditions. Skokie, with its sprawling log building and family of cabins and sheds, was a welcome sight. December 17th, 1984, marked the beginning of our winter adventure catering to backcountry ski guests. Helen, our supervisor, arrived 2 hours later. The kerosene lamps were lit. A supper of steaming macaroni and cheese was ready to fortify us for the frigid night ahead. The old timber lodge was only a few degrees warmer than the minus 30 degrees outside. It was prudent to sleep around the wood stove, toques covering our heads and old woolen army blankets piled over our sleeping bags created the illusion of warmth. Sleep was punctuated by growls and cat-like shrieks coming from martins who had claimed the far corner of the lodge. In the morning, we stepped gingerly over their coiled droppings. Fresh eggs cached on the ceiling-high buffet had attracted their attention. Intact shells with contents sucked dry lay strewn along the wooden floor. Skokie Lodge Christmas guests would be arriving within the week, and there was a lot of cleaning to be done. Scrub, disinfect, scrub again would become our mantra. On the day of the big clean, Helen and I were awakened by a ruckus coming from the kitchen. Wayne was unsuccessfully attempting to oust a marten with a big broom. We appeared just as that marten was taking refuge in a small space, daring any further attempt at combat, only its beady eyes visible. Joe, the Skokie carpenter, was passionate about Skokie. He welcomed opportunities to undertake the badly needed lodge repairs. Joe often told stories and insisted they were true. One such story was about a man whose penis was attacked by a marten. This happened while sitting in the outhouse heeding nature's call. He grinned at Wayne with a look that said, "Don't say I didn't warn ya." Breakfast always seemed most onerous. It necessitated rising in the dark after 6 and suffering the bone-chilling cold. My fantasy was to swing that huge iron skillet with its 52-egg omelet like a lasso and saying, "Come and get it." I still remember the morning that Barb shrieked after discovering river cereal grains had exploded into every nook and cranny in the kitchen. Someone had forgotten to tighten the lid on the jar, presenting the marmots with a free-for-all. We braved blustery winds and drifting snow in search of a perfect Christmas tree. Someone's clever idea, a bucket full of nails, replaced the traditional stand. While making popcorn garlands to decorate the tree, we sampled Helen's decadent shortbreads. Fresh eggnog, probably laced with rum, put us all in a very relaxed mood. Helen's friend Pat joined us for a few days. She helped make gingerbread people for the tree. After discovering several gingerbread amputees, undecorating our tree became a nightly ritual. Christmas Eve was celebrated in traditional French-Canadian manner. Des amis Canadiens de Alain had come to visit. 11 guests and Skokie staff savored a tasty tourtière. The salad of baby greens tossed with tangy poppy seed dressing complemented it. Cauliflower and a favorable sauce, as well as freshly baked herb bread, completed the main entree. It was hard to resist the banana spice cake that followed later. You know, amenities like running water, flush toilets, and electricity were non-existent. Shocked guests were those who had not grasped the meaning of Skokie being advertised as rustic. One group even asked, "Where's the sauna?" Skokie staff did enjoy what we called the outhouse sauna. Our sauna was constructed from old outhouse boards that summer, and it was strictly for our use. Skokie guests each had an army-style tin pan. Water kept in big pots on the oil burner was available for their personal use. The 100-foot trek to the outhouse was somewhat challenging on those nights when the temperature dipped below -20. Guests after the first night dramatically decreased their fluid intake in the morning. My heart went out to an older gentleman who made 3 trips to the outhouse that one night. I suggested that a big empty juice can could be his, providing he dealt with the contents. The look on his face was priceless. On evenings when the wind was calm, about 6 sentences. On evenings when the winds were calm and moonful, Wayne and I sat bundled on the old-fashioned porch swing. A group of Kiwis had given a new perspective to the position of the stars. He remarked, the sky was upside down. The moment spent gazing at the multitude of stars blazing in the darkness and at fossil mountains silhouetted against the moonlight sky were magical ones. The few months spent at Skokie Lodge were in many ways an adventure beyond all my expectations. I am forever grateful for Skokie being the catalyst that had sparked my creative muse.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jule. My sister goes to Skokie quite often, and I had heard that story about the marmot in the outhouse, and ever since then, every time I go to the outhouse, I always look down first before I sit.
And it's actually Kate and Will stayed in one of the cottages on their honeymoon, which was interesting. There's a good story. The next time you go, look for the story that I added for the Skokie outhouses that were high rises. I won't say anything about that now. That's another story, but it's quite entertaining.
All right. Bring it in January.
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to our next open micer then. My co-author and friend, Vicki Drybrough. There you are. Vicki, take it away.
Thanks, Derek. In Margaret Atwood's new book, Dearly, there is a poem called Salt, in which she writes, "Don't look behind, they say. You'll turn to salt. Why not, though? Why not look? Isn't it glittery? Isn't it pretty back there?" You can't go there now. You cannot walk barefoot along the road on a hot afternoon in summer, with the dust puffing up between your toes, or spend all day on the beach and never see another soul. You can't put your ear to a telephone pole in a high wind, hear the wire singing like a Sunday choir. On an incoming tide in the middle of a gale, we played chicken with the wicked gray-green waves that roared towards us like locomotives until they loomed higher than our heads. We clung to each other, screaming as each giant bared its teeth, threw its shoulder into the rock below with a boom that silenced thunder, and smashed into 1,000 pieces at our feet. Above the beach, the wind beat the trees with heavy hands as they stood their ground, hair blowing back, small birds huddled at their feet. In the fall, there were bonfires, great infernos high as the woodshed, hot enough to devour old costumes from Christmas plays, broken shoes, unwanted notebooks, and my brother's copy of Lady Chatterley's Lover. When the flames burned low and the red-hot embers glowed like the kitchens of hell, there would be potatoes, baked in the coals until their jackets grew thick and black, insides whiter and fluffier than dandelion heads, burning our mouths and tongues as we gobbled them down, our teeth and lips black with soot. In winter, we stood with our boots almost touching the still gray sea and watched as snowflakes, arriving home at last, kissed the dark face of the sea with their tiny frozen lips before disappearing inside. Snow lay on the land whiter than a cat's throat up to our waists in hollow places. The road, a long shining river that overflowed its banks to become a sea of perfect white, only the tops of the fence posts showing through. The breeze smelled of the sea, the only sound its whispered breathing, until the grader rounded the corner. We could only watch and frown as the blade churned up the smooth white river with rocks and dirt, then moved on, making toboggan lanes on the long hills. Later, we nodded in the warm as the fire spit in the grate and made the kettle moan in its sleep. Socks and mittens on the oven door, the smell of wet wool and pitch. Coal oil lamps shone from cabin windows, dim as distant stars in the thick night, when home was further than you thought. A cold moon winding through the forest drew bands of shadow on the pale road, our mother walking close in case of bandits or bears. We traveled by clinker-built boat, 10-horse Johnson drowning our voices, the wind tearing at my mother's silk headscarf through waves that leapt and snarled, trying to grab hold and drag us down. At night, stars hung like shards of broken mirror, close enough to prick your finger or make a wish, while the moon lit a path on the sea wide enough for walking. Waves with their soft, dark mouths kissed the land, while time, like a poisoned apple, came for us all as we lay under the sea spell, sleeping.
Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Vicki.
So well.
Yeah.
Really
Whoa.
good job. Enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, I was there, totally there. Yes, gorgeous. All right. Did Linda Thompson ever come tonight?
I'm going to say good night. I'm terribly sorry. It's 11:30 at night for me, and I have to be, I get up, the Shelties get me up about 5:30.
No worries, Marjorie. Thank you for staying up as late as you did, and wonderful reading. Really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. I enjoyed all the readings so much. They were all so different, and thank you so very much. I hope to see you all another time. Take good care in this strange old world.
You too.
Thank you, Marjorie.
All right.
Right
Yeah.
then, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Well,
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Derek,
Linda.
I am here.
Ah, you're here. Wonderful, wonderful. All right. Our resident Port Alberni poet going to share some poetry with us tonight.
Yeah, some prose poetry.
Awesome. Prose poems. I love them. Go ahead.
The Long Haul, it's called. No life is easy, and she might have made it this far, dragging that old stone boat, stacked with diet books, a grocery bag of stretchy pants, her supplements in a Ziploc, rattling like baby teeth. And some nights she dreams of a faller in his corks and chopped off red straps, the slope of his shoulder, but she could not disguise her allergy to coniferous. So after that summer and then the next, she threw in with a blonde ex-army with a good laugh, an ID bracelet stamped with his sin, 200 acres, 15 heifers, and an 8x40 Airstream on blocks. And from there, it seemed a clear shot through, and might have been, except that a few years on, the everyday and the not so everyday began to balloon like 100-year curse. Fire, drought, rain, snow, mortgage, taxes, interest rates, bad decisions, bad joints, no good mornings, no honeys, no sweethearts, good dogs run off, roofs blown off, price of gas, price of beef, frozen shoulders, lymphoma, the Department of Agriculture, dried up wells, dried up milkers, busted tie rods, timing belts, bearings, crankshafts, rust, bent pins, tainted sand points, mildewed windrows, broken windows, fences down, trees down, no tea in bed, no darlings, no let's take the evenings off. Weed inspector, potato inspector, nutty neighbors, millennium crew, wild streak heifers, fat horse, sewer lines, broken limbs, founders, colic, brucellosis, everything they could not name, black leg, bloat, wireworm, silver scurf, nematode, fear of blight, blight, all drained into the hollow between them. And here she is, hoofing it south, her stuff in a boat that will never float, 17 black journals and a pencil behind her ear. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. That's got to be one of my favorite prose poems of yours. I love that. That's fabulous. All right, after Linda comes Karen Poirier. Is Karen in the audience there? I can't see her. You there, Karen?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, awesome. Okay, another past student of mine. Looking forward to what you got to read. Go ahead.
About a year and a half ago, my husband and I, with our son and daughter-in-law, made a trip to the British Isles. And I thought tonight I would read an excerpt from a story I wrote as that was inspired by our last trip. Okay. Mulligans since 1782. We were finishing our tour of the British Isles with a visit to Dublin in the Republic of Ireland after we'd toured Belfast in Northern Ireland. I'd seen enough dusty ruins of castles, stony skeletons of a past that had long ago disappeared. I wanted to get to the heart of today's Ireland by raising a glass in a real Irish pub. And so near the end of the day, our taxi driver took us to Mulligan's. When I looked ahead at the entrance to the pub, I couldn't help but feel drawn in by tentacles of the past. Outside, the building appeared Lilliputian, a stubby exterior overshadowed by concrete and steel giants surrounding it on all sides. It truly was a hole in a modern wall. The tavern was a meeting place in a neighborhood changed by a slow osmosis of political and economic development. As I entered the modest doorway and looked around at the Spartan surroundings, its faded wooden tables and chairs and brightly lit bar, I imagined voices rising up in the tavern's interior, revealing its long and difficult history. His hands shook. Calloused and worn, they were the hands of a giant, unnaturally possessed by a man short in stature but powerfully built. His eyes, downcast, were moist with worry. His neighbor Colum sat down beside him, filling the shadowy interior with his bulk. Both men were wearing work clothes, faded and stained by the earth they worked in and frayed at the cuffs of their jackets. A medley of smells, fresh hay, earthy loam, and tart ale combined with wood smoke lingered in the dying rays of daylight peeking through a narrow window. The men were frozen in their dread, deep in thought and unable to express their fears. Thomas held a glass, wet and cold, that felt glued to his hand, then silently put it down on the table in front of them. No, no! A loud wail pierced the thick walls of the tavern, spread through the gray twilight and filled every corner inside with icy terror. The curdling sound gathered strength, settled on the wooden beams, and like thunder rolling over the hills, spread out through the oak door, down the muddy street, and over the tenants' expanse of farmland. It was joined by a chorus of howling. Even the hazy sky appeared ruptured with the caterwaul emanating from the farmers' cottages below. His head tilted forward as if last winter's memories made it too heavy to hold up. "So it's the cursed rot again then," he said, his voice trembling and his stomach churning. "They've left us nothing but rotten potatoes. Wagon loads of our crops are leaving." The pub's patrons grew still, their cheerful chatter silent. They stared as though boring through the walls at gardens put to bed in the hardening ground. The potato crops were infected with blight. Once again they would starve in a land that was as green as emeralds and rich with moisture and sunshine. One man rose from his seat. His frame appeared lanky and hollow after last year's struggles, and his face, deprived of its youth, was now deeply lined and somber looking. He moved towards Thomas and Cullum, and as he passed them, he quietly tapped them both on the shoulder and discreetly motioned for them to join him at a table at the back of the tavern. The three men put their heads together, their whispers barely audible over the wailing coming from the cottages in the village. "Jesus, we've got to do something. What in God's name? The fish still swim in the streams. We can't take this lying down. I've got a plan. You know what'll happen if we're caught breaking the law? Aye, then we'll not get caught." And I'll end it there.
Beautiful. I want to hear that. Carry on. Maybe next time you can give us another installment. That's a potato famine, eh? Interesting, the theme of blight. Linda picked it up and you carried it on. Okay. All right. Our next reader is Laurie Blakely. Laurie. Or was Joe supposed to go next? Karl, help me out here.
All right, it's Joe.
Joe. Okay.
Joe's next, and then
all right.
after Joe, it's Jacqueline.
All right. Sorry, I must have missed the updated list here. All right. Sorry, Jacqueline. Or sorry, Laurie. You got to hang on for a bit. Go ahead there, Joe. AKA Bob.
Unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good.
Am I getting through?
Here, just a minute.
You're good, Bob. Go ahead.
Bob.
Okay. Democracy grants us freedom of speech, but if media monopoly rules, can anyone bucking national interest and church state ever make the news? Does media pay the piper and names the tune? Or can we depend on labor, NAACP, and foreign press to publish opposing views? Does US moral majority atheist political candidates refuse? Did opposition or press question if God told Bush to smite Al-Qaeda, or was it schizophrenia? Is Big Brother watching? Has even the internet been compromised? Is it megalomania? If reporters had judge status and could only be fired for just cause, could offensive truth and freedom of speech overrule politically correct laws? Do we protect whistleblowers and teachers that promised debate on what was learned in residential school? Will they terminate, or can her union arbitrate? If evolution was considered taboo, could Darwinism have gained converts, or would we all still be banging our heads on the Wailing Wall or reciting Our Father who art in heaven and praying to God for asteroid intercession? Will global melting bring even more recession? 90% of world's languages and religions are extinct. Should politicians resurrect Notre Dame and tribal tongues to buy votes with our tax dollars today? Will we ever have our say, or does media tell us what they want us to know and we obey? Let us pray that US democracy isn't mockery and dystopian like in Hitler's day. If lobbying is legal bribery and the 1% rule both parties, are politicians and reporters actors in this tragedy play? That's one rant. Here's another one. There are millions of lights in space, with some going out and others turning on. Before our light shuts off, will we find another Goldilocks planet home? What if this desirable real estate is already occupied by many warring nations, but far below our technological level? Do we emulate imperialist success, awing natives with technology and scaring hell out of them with missionaries that will save their souls? Do we divide them even more, backing some tribes against others, and what wars don't decimate our intelligent designed viruses, germs, alcohol, and drugs that they have no immunity for, will thin the herd and even create more breathing space. If the planet is not divided by race and religion, and like a bee colony is poised to sting any invader, do we risk losses and possibly pollute New World, making it uninhabitable for anyone? Is better course of action to develop a virus to kill them and a vaccine to give ourselves immunity? Can we be the victim and ET is already here with the pandemic? That's it.
You fill me full of hope. Thank you, brother.
I think you're watching too much news, Bob. No, you bring up a lot of the questions a lot of people are wrangling with right now, I think, for sure. So thanks for that. All right, now, Jackie, I'm going to get you in proper line here. I see the R11 in front of your name. And that's the tricky part with the speaker view, is that I only see a few people, so I have to go by the list. All right, and I think Karl's holding up your book, hoping that you're going to read something from there. So take it away. Yes, you are. Okay.
My thanks to anybody that has ordered this book. That's very exciting for me. It's called Heard Amid the Guns, True Stories from the Western Front, 1914 to 1918. Since we don't really have a bookstore in town, people are ordering it off the internet, and that's absolutely fantastic. It has a lot of pictures in it, so I'm going to start with one. And this was taken. This is a place that still exists. And if you can you see that? I'm hoping you can see that. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that place still exists. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it here. The Great War had a significant impact on the works of some of the top writers of the 20th century. For the British author of Lord of the Rings, imagery and fierce quests in his early works were foreshadowed on the Western Front, where J.R.R. Tolkien was in the British Army. The 2019 biopic Tolkien, directed by Dome Karakowski and written by David Gleason and Stephen Beresford, draws parallels between his war experience and his work. Consider a small canal bank house with a round door, covered in vines, mossy with age. It sounds like a hobbit home right out of the mind of the Lord of the Rings author J.R.R. Tolkien, something he might have even seen as a great war veteran himself, or something you might see at the modern but curiously ancient-seeming Hobbiton in New Zealand. But it was anything but fantasy when tens of thousands of Belgian families were displaced, when their homes on the Western Front's devastated zone were destroyed by shelling. For them, economic hardship and hunger were byproducts of the war, said guide and researcher Nick Mole, who lives in Vulgem, West Flanders. For example, Mole said, a former British bunker on the canal in Bozinga in West Flanders became an emergency accommodation for an extended family after the war. Behind the odd rounded door was a haven for people who were refugees in their own land. Many cities and towns were completely destroyed. The families who had fled from the violence of war returned after the war and had nothing left. It took years before many of the houses were rebuilt in the West Corner. Hence, many sought temporary shelter in bunkers and sheds, said Mole. Again, it's from Heard Amid the Guns, True Stories from the Western Front, 1914 to 1918 by moi, Jacqueline, Carmichael. And if anybody buys this, since we're not doing signings, I can arrange, if you want it for a present or something, I can arrange a special hand-signed book plate that I can send to you or that you can pick up. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. That was great as always. And yeah, good idea in the midst of the COVID thing to do the signed book plates that they can just put on the book. That's a gorgeous idea. Put it on your porch and they can come pick it up, right? Awesome. Okay. All right. And correct me if I'm wrong, Karl, but I'm pretty sure we're on to Laurie Blakely now. Is that correct?
Yes, we are.
All right, Laurie, are you there? There you
Great.
are, Laurie. Good to see you.
I'm here.
All right.
Take
it away.
Thanks. I'm always threatening to do something that's not funny, so I'm finally going to. Perhaps I'll tell a little anecdote afterwards. So I wrote this many years ago, and well, you'll see the state I was in. Exist or exit. Reasons I am anchored to this earth are not any longer. The lives I witness bore of me, those are the breaths that keep me here. Have kept, no longer do. A child's grace, a whim, request, judge, order, an instinct. Regret, throes of grief, wonder, not awe, awful, tangled thoughts amplify pain, sadness drips upon my skin. Face the sun while the salt stains, face the fact, face of tears, trace the memory, face of tears, stained traces, trapped in my own brokenness, torn in my own fashion, born into chaos, my own. I owe my life to you all. For how long? For what purpose? Now. For is it mine to ask, to want, to wonder, to end, to demanding? Imagine a knife ripped along the wrist, red, released, ruby, splash, drip, run the length of my soul, released, warm and luscious, languid pools, exquisite flows, ribboned, crimson, released. I, the ingrate money grubber, stingy, selfish, thoughtless, extravagant, irresponsible, lazy, your eater of bonbons, hid in plain sight, embarrassment, duty, dreams, duty, desire, duty, delirium, denial, exist now, duty calls, exit delayed.
There, we've seen the other side of Laurie. Beautiful, powerful, emotional, raw. Yeah. And good to
So,
be on the other side of it, right?
yes, I'm here.
You're here and we're all glad you are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a short anecdote. I have written it, but I'll just tell it because it's briefer. My son was 2, and it was always difficult to haul him out of the car after we've had a trip anywhere because he loved to play in the car. It was better than the playground. He'd tumble back and forth between the seats, push all the buttons, pretend to drive. And on one occasion, I had to take him out of the car, literally haul him out, and explain to him that cars would get very hot in the sun, and you could actually die from getting too hot, staying in the car for too long. Later on that evening, he was in the bath, and he happened to notice that the jets in the jacuzzi tub that we had were not level, different from one side of the tub to the other. And I told him what a great eye he had, and that he must have, that he inherited that great eye from his grandfather. And he started to ask me about his grandfather. And I had to explain to him that his grandfather, my dad, had died. And he looked at me and he was like, was he playing in the car? So, out of the mouths of babes.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, for both of those, Laurie. All right. Karl, just making sure there wasn't anyone that signed up late.
No.
Before
You close us off with your great whatever you have.
All right. I'm just going to give you a couple of short poems. The first one I think is something we can all relate to. It's called COVID fatigue. I think most of us are so looking forward to that vaccination making it across the country and getting things back to normal. Oh my God, it'll be lovely. So it goes like this. It starts slowly, a forgotten mask, a shared elevator, an urge to pay with cash. It's like stress cracks in cement. We can see them in the burly guy in produce who reaches across your face to grab some broccoli, in the neighbor who brings you sunflowers and waits for you at the door. Somehow, amidst all the talk of this second wave, we only want to forget it. Say enough already. I want to dance the dust out of the floorboards at Char's again. I want to feel the percussion of a poem ripple out across an audience and know I'm not alone. I have to write another poem called The Third Wave, and that's the one where we wave goodbye to this pandemic, right? That will be the big wave. And the last one I want to read is for my wife's grandmother, Elda Anderson, who passed away on Mother's Day this year. And it's kind of a conglomeration of memories of things that we did in her house. And it, you know, it was one thing to have her pass away in relative isolation, and then to go and clean her house out, and all those memories that are tucked up in there. So I tried to jam them all together. She was a woman who was raised as a Saskatchewan homesteader, and was just one of those, I don't think there'll ever be people like them again, who just knew how to make use of everything. I mean, her favorite thing to do, she couldn't be unproductive. Even if she was talking to you, she'd be knitting or crocheting. She crocheted hundreds of face cloths and dishcloths and gave them gifts to all the kids and the grandkids and everyone. So we all have hundreds of these things around the house to remind us of her, right? So anyway, it's called Grandma's House. The hole the bear tore in your fence is patched now, but the hole you're leaving left in us is far from mended. The kitchen where you shared the secrets of perfect peach cobbler with each grandchild in turn holds someone else's cookware now. The ceramic roosters and the silken swans have flown free. Your crooked-tailed cats drag dead leaves into a stranger's house. Grandmother, Who will take the shaky stairs to the basement when the heat of July stokes the living room and fills the grapes that crowd your deck with light? And when the figs swell with sugar, who will reach out your windows to pick the sticky fruit and dare to speak of lost brothers and dust bowls and the orange stones of Arizona in one breath? When the rains of winter drive us inside to contemplate what can be made from odds and ends, who will gather at the sewing table to craft necklaces from scraps of typewriters and silverware? Who will come to alter books and decoupage the pages with your stories? We who wash the tears from our faces with your gifts, feel in the crocheted cloths the rough caress of love you stitched in us, taste it in our lives, like butter and pastry, each bite a touch more precious now, without you here to fill it. All right. So, thank you. Barring no other readers, yes, it's going to be salutations and happy holidays to everyone. But before we go, I just want to say a few big thank yous that are well deserved. Primarily to our gracious host, Char and Char's Landing, who tees this up and navigates it and publicizes it and is clinging to existence as we wait for this COVID thing to end so we can go back to her place and have more fun again. So remembering that e-transfers are always welcome, e-transfer at charslanding.com to help her along will be wonderful. Also, big thanks to Jackie Carmichael for all she does to line up our featured readers and publicize the event and make it run smoothly. Thanks to Karl for your technical assistance and guidance along the way, keeping me on the straight and narrow. And thanks, of course, to our featured readers, Craig Copland and Marjorie Simmons, whose name jumped out of my head at that moment. And for all the other micers who read to us tonight, really some incredibly good writing tonight. I think the standard just keeps going up and up, and it's wonderful to see. So and thank you for the listeners who joined just to listen in, and please share the link for our January 15th Zoom session at the Electric Mermaid with all of your friends and families. The more the merrier here. And we do have room for more open micers too. So if you know other writers who want to read, just direct them to charslanding.com and they can find the way to the sign up sheet there to email Karl. Actually, I'll get Jackie, throw it in the chat real quick, the email address for signing up for readers. Good to sign up ahead of time to make sure you're going to get on the list, because we're getting larger and we don't want to have too many people squeezed out. So that's it. Thank you all for coming. Happy holidays. Stay safe. We'll throw the mics open if anybody wants to hang around and chat.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. Loved you all.
Stay safe.
Thank you, Derek. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Mask up.